Just test, 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 test. We are trying to be prepared. We are trying to be prepared because that's what we need to do. Everybody knows. Test, 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 test. Test, test. Test. Test.
Okay, so as expected, that right there sounds pretty much the same. We've just doubled the guitar, but because we turned the volume down, we now have the same sound, okay? So what I want to do now is show you how I set this up with our different EQ, and I guess I got to bring my tracks back. And we're going to put in a slight bit of different EQing. And the trick with this is whatever you want one to be your bright and one to be your dark is the easy way of saying it. But we want to take the frequency that we're accentuating on one guitar and not accentuate it on the other guitar. The Recording Revolution talks about this. Graham Cochran talks about this trick, and it's very effective. So what we're going to do is take the frequency here, and this one is kind of muddiness. We're going to leave that one alone. That one was minus 2 dB. We're going to leave that one alone because those are removing somewhat bad frequencies of the guitar. But up here you can see we have accentuated by almost 7 dB at the top end. And so what I'm going to do is just turn this down to 0 on my second guitar. And then you can see that I have removed a frequency here by 2, and I'm going to raise that by 2. So we've kind of flipped the EQ pattern. And if we just listen to that real quick, I will, let's see, solo this one first, and then we'll go to the other one. This is going to sound like it's, well, let me put these in the middle here. Here we go. So we're going to go like this. So this is the brighter one. This is the darker one. So where this starts to become effective is when we do the panning hard left and hard right, and we put both of them together at the same time. Now we're going to start to hear a slightly different sound in our left ear than we do in our right ear. So it's quite jarring when you go from left to right, but trust me that you're hearing the brighter one here on the left and the slightly darker one on the right. Now what we want to do is take the darker one, the one that is our altered sound, and we want to delay that one by 14 milliseconds. So in this DAW, I can select the track, go up to my inspector, and then I've got a delay feature up here, and I can just hit 14 milliseconds, and now it's going to delay it. So I'm actually going to start out at 0, no delay, and while it's playing, I want you to hear when I add that millisecond delay in, it's really going to make it sound like it's 2 guitars then. So here's playing. Back to the center. All right, so you hear that thing open up really, really nice and become a really stereo panned guitar sound. So that's what we're looking to do. We're looking to take one guitar that comes into the console. We can duplicate it on channels, 2 different channels. We can adjust our EQing slightly. All right, so here's a little science lesson for you. And let me see if, all right. So what we have here is a quick display of the fact that when you have guitar 1 that is in time over here, and you then put the same signal delayed, your ear will take anything that is 20 milliseconds of the same thing within 20 milliseconds, and it will get rid of it, and it will kind of turn it off to not hear it. Now, you still hear it, especially when it's in a strong panned scenario, but the way this works is if you are close to a person and they're talking, and then you're near a wall, you're going to hear the reflection off of the wall. Well, the brain will cut out the reflection and keep the initial source over here, and it will get rid of the one, in this case, our acoustic guitar 2, that is delayed up to 20 milliseconds. When you start to get to 21, 22, 25 milliseconds and above, it will actually hear both sounds. Let's listen to it. It brings it back into the center. If I remove the 2 dB, it's weighted more to the left. So you've got these options that you can work with to kind of generically pan the signal. Now, obviously, you could adjust panning just by your pan knob, whatever yours looks like. But knowing that you can adjust the volume to help center or pan the signal left or right, then you've got an extra tool in your tool bag that you can use there. So what I want to do now is listen to the mono signal, and we're going to put it on with the pads, and then we're going to flip-flop over to the stereo group and listen to it with the pads and see what we get. So here's the mono signal. So again, this is just a quick trick that I use to be able to thicken up my acoustic guitar a little bit and add some depth and width into the mix by just using one guitar but duplicating it into the board. One of the things to keep in mind is that obviously this is just the same input source, so the same strumming pattern, the same inflections that the guitarist is doing is going to be duplicated. So if you don't like your guitar sound, then you're just duplicating something you don't like. Let's try and work on the actual guitar or the strumming or the instrumentalist and help guide them into playing better or getting a good signal to come into your desk. And then when you duplicate it, you've got some great material to work with. This trick might just help you take your 3, 4, or 5-piece band and really add some additional character to it.
All right, so it's a pretty cool technique that we can get where you can double and then use a delay on one side. Couple things to make sure of. If you do this on your console and you have people running in your monitors that are a mono scenario, that's how my church is. Both ears. Make sure that you only use if you've got a mono PA, you can set the one going into your room. The second one, you can turn off the stereo bus icon or button so it's not orange. That means that the second one is not going into your room in your mono PA. And so your main signal is panned however it's just going to be straight down the middle effectively in a mono PA. But then in the stream, in your sends, you can pan those hard left and hard right just for your stream. So a couple of different scenarios there and some things to think about. But hopefully you enjoyed this video. Thanks for checking it out. Hey, give it a thumbs up. And what are some other tricks that you've got that you do to get some stereo width in your mix? I'd love to hear about those in the comments below. Make sure you hit the subscribe button, and we will catch you guys in the next one. Peace. All right, welcome back to Alum House Sound. Today we continue the series of how my live stream setup is built. So we've already done an overview, we've done drums, we've talked about band. The next thing, this video, is about vocals. Now for most of us, maybe all of us, vocals tend to be the most important piece of the mix. The band can be great, but if you don't hear the vocals, they don't really hear the vocals. And a lot of us want people to sing along, and so we need the vocals to sit on top of the mix and be very present in the mix, but also controlled. Vocals are the most dynamic instrument that we get. Each word can be big and then soft at the end of the word, or they can grow, or they could sing loud, or they could be background vocals and be supportive information to the main lead vocal. So there's all these different things that we need to attend to and things that we are contending with to build this mix properly. Now, one of the things that stands out in this new rendition of my scene is the way that I'm treating the reverb on the vocals. Now, we've talked in previous videos about all of the different reverbs that I'm using in my delay, and we're going to dive in today to the reverb that's specific to the vocals, the delay that's specific to the vocals, and how they impact the sound and really what they do in the overall mix. So it's kind of a jam-packed video. We're only dealing with 4 instruments, 2 of which are the pastor's mic and the handheld mic that we use kind of for announcements or anybody else that comes on stage. The other 2 are vocals, singing vocals. And so that's where we're gonna really spend the bulk of our time today. But I want you to see how they're all laid out, how I'm using the different plugins that are in the X32 that are available to you, and the different reverbs and how they all mix together. So this is gonna be a jam-packed video. Hold on tight, and we'll see you at the end. Let's get started. If we look at the screen here, again, as we've talked about, we have some pretty important things here in terms of what we can see. And I'm going to actually change the screen in just a minute. So we've got our pastor's mic, we've got our wireless handheld mic that we use for announcements or potentially other speaking. Those 2 are kind of speaking mics. Then we have 3 wired mic potentials. Typically in this example, the male lead and then the female lead are here. We do have a 3rd vocal that could be used, but that's usually just going to be kind of a background vocal, if you will. And then we've got the DCAs, again, similar to what I do with the drums here. I've just got I'm using when I'm mixing, and you'll see we have a DCA for vocal group, and that's just that once I get a mix of these, let's say that we have her turned down some, I can turn the vocal group, the entire vocal group up or down just with one fader. I don't have to mess with the mix over here, especially if I've got a 3rd person maybe singing in here somewhere. I don't have to mess with all 3 of them. I can just use the DCA. We know what DCAs are for, but that gives me that capability there. So I'm not going to talk any more about that. The only last one that we'll show you here is the DCA for the delay. Now, I mentioned in the preview video or the overview video number 1 of this series, I mentioned that this DCA
is controlling a specific setup on my my delay and chamber effect, which is just for vocal. De-esser into the console. And what this is doing is, if you're not familiar with a de-esser, it's removing certain frequencies. It's just it's a compressor that's built around certain frequencies, so that the higher band is removing. Things off, shall we? All right, so let's take a listen to this raw pastor's mic here.
Authority and pegging our lives to anything other than ourselves. And it is not good out there. And honestly, the Bible is the best thing I could give you as a source of authority for your life, and is the best tool I could put in your hand so that you will not ruin your.
All right, now let's take a look at the EQ that we're doing. Well, let's listen through the chain here. So we'll do de-essing first.
Get into that stuff, and we can read that, and we can do the podcast, and we can geek out about that. I like all that stuff too. But what I'm telling you is, at the end of the day, I'm going to reach higher than all of that stuff, which is here now and will be forgotten in a generation. I'm aiming higher at the wisdom of the ages, the truth of the Scripture that has endured.
All right, so not a huge change, but it does catch some stuff depending on where the mic is placed. It's different. Even as he's moving through the service, he typically tends to touch the mic, unfortunately. Sometimes sound people want to tape it to his face, but that's only in theater performances, unfortunately. All right, so then we'll take a look at the EQ. You can already see that it's a pretty drastic EQ curve, but let's take a look at that. Here we go.
And that truth, we've torn down the history of our country. We've torn down all the things. And then we wonder why we don't get along.
Now the EQ.
We're not connected to anything. And so I want to give you this to help us.
So that's a pretty drastic change. We're taking out a lot of the body, a lot of those lower mids of this vocal, and also what it's picking up from the actual room sound as well. Let's turn those off, listen to it, and then turn it back on.
When the curveballs come. We all think we're going to be ready for the moment and rise to the occasion, but it's not true. The Greek poet thousands of years ago, Archilochus, wrote these words, and I've thought about them a lot over the last year.
Yeah,
we don't rise to the level of our expectations. We fall to the level of our training.
All right, let's take a look at the compressor now.
Greatness.
All right, I want to talk about compressor settings real quick on this specifically, because I get this question a lot. How do you compress your pastor? For me, I always compress him. Like, he's always in compression, but there's a trick that you have to know to make it sound natural. So my ratio is a 5-to-1 ratio. I have a 20 millisecond attack. The hold is as far down as it's at 0. Then I have a 40 millisecond release. Now, the gain, I do have him coming back up some on the makeup gain. This right here is the makeup gain. And if I go to the other settings, the knee is the biggest thing that I can tell you here. The knee right up here is set at 5. Now, on the actual console, it's on the second page. You have to hit the page down or the layer down button. But the knee is at 5, and that is the smoothest rolling on and off that we can get. That's the secret right there. So let's take a listen to it in compression and not compression. So this is off.
With the sacred writings, which are able to make you wise for salvation through faith in Christ Jesus. First of all, Paul tells Timothy, hey, Remember what you have learned from the scriptures that have made you wise for salvation.
So you can see he's
understand
always
when
hitting the
Paul says
compressor.
the scriptures are the sacred writings, he's not talking about what we call the New Testament because they're living that. They're in it right then and there. He's talking about the Jewish scriptures, the Old Testament, the Torah, what we would call the Old Testament. He's talking about that. Timothy was steeped in that from his mother and his...
See that? So when he said Timothy, it almost took out 6 dB of him, but you can't tell because he's kind of always in compression. So it's more just kind of rolling on and off. It's just adjusting the fader for us. Here, he's getting into it pretty good. All right, so that's kind of the big thing that I do with my pastor and my handheld. I keep the knee at 5. I keep them always on compression. They're on the compressor when they're just breathing, and then when they're talking, they're more in compression. So play with that within your setting. I will caution you if you stage is not that deep. If you have a shallow stage, or if you have a very echoey room, or if your pastor is just overall close to your PA speakers in terms of being in alignment with your PA speakers, that mic's going to ring out. It's going to feedback, and I tend to not want to remove too many frequencies and ring out that mic. I want it to sound natural. I want the vocal microphone to sound like the person. The EQing that I'm doing is tending to be making the microphone sound like the person, as opposed to pulling out a bunch of oddball frequencies just because the room is feeding back. So play with it. Be cautious with compression and overly compressing, especially on a speaking microphone. But that trick of running a knee at 5 can really be a godsend for you. All right, so let's take a look at the handheld microphone. The handheld microphone is just running through the other side of the de-esser. It's a very similar chain here. You can see we've got this effects chain, which is the de-esser. Then we've got EQ and compression. And these settings are going to be pretty similar. That we did not use this handheld microphone in this service, but if we just look at the EQ here, this is what the EQ looks like on my handheld. So you can see my low cuts at 230 hertz. This works that I can hand it to a male, a female. I don't have a lot of boominess. I've got a pretty even sound in terms of compression. It's pretty similar. We're running 5-to-1 compression, 30 millisecond attack, and then the knee on this one is at 4. It just seemed to work better for me, but having that pretty a knee of 4 or 5 seems to really help roll that stuff off. But I can hand this microphone to anybody and not really be concerned about what I'm going to get. All I have to do is quickly adjust the level. And these microphones are typically handed to somebody and they walk out on stage. We don't get a sound check with it. So that's just something to keep in mind. All right, let's get on to kind of the star of the show here for this discussion. This is going to be our singing vocals. So I'm going to reset a couple things and then we will get on to our male lead vocal.
We pause for a quick commercial break. Please take a second and visit the like button and the subscribe button.
All right, so let's dive into this. This is going to be fun. This is going to be quite a ride. So buckle in your seatbelts here, and I'll show you. This is really the biggest change that I've made since I built this initial scene months ago, was changing the effects to get the sound that I wanted on my vocals while they're singing. So first off, we're just going to do dry vocals. All right, so all of my effects, all of my compressors, all of my EQs are turned off. Let's just listen to these 2 vocal mics, male and female. They're on the front of the stage. These are just standard hardwired SM58s that are going, actually I take that back. These are Blue Encore 200s. Now we changed to the Blue Encore 200s a little bit ago. And so these are just straight mic. We do have, and I'll tell you, we do have a plexiglass shell around our drums. Keep that in mind when you hear how much drum bleed there is into these microphones. All right, let's take a listen to these.
The Lord is in this place, and not for a minute was I forsaken. The Lord is in this place. The Lord is in this place, and come, Holy Spirit.
All right, so not too terrible, but we're getting a pretty raw, direct sound. So let's take these first with the male vocal. And we're going to add these things in place in line with what we're doing. So the first thing we've got here is our EQ. I'm always going to EQ first before I compress on a vocal. All right, so this is no EQ.
The Lord is in this place.
All right, low cut.
And come, Holy Spirit.
Just listen to that change. You'll hear kind of low rumble. Oh.
The Lord is in this place. The Lord is in this place.
All right, now the actual EQ.
And not for a minute was I forsaken.
All right, all the EQ
The
off.
Lord is in this place. The Lord.
Test, 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 test. Test, test, test. Test, test, test. The Lord is in this place. The Lord is in this place. The Lord is in this place. Lord, the Lord, the Lord, the Lord, the Lord, oh, oh. The Lord, oh, oh. The Lord. This place, the Lord.
Test. 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 Hey!
All right, so similarly, this is the female vocal. We have, this is dry here. Everything is turned off, as you can see.
Was I forsaken? The Lord is in this place.
Low cut first.
Dry bones awaken.
EQ.
The Lord is in this place. The Lord is in this place.
All right, so on this vocal, what's the EQ is doing for me, she's got a lot of kind of chest. And so this just a little bit of kind of nasaliness or whatever the case was.
The Lord is in this
are
place.
kind of taming that harshness. A lot in female vocals. This one right here, you'll see is around 1,000 hertz. 1,000 hertz on a female vocal usually gets a little out of hand, and I don't care which female vocal it is, I'm going to take some of it out. You can see in this case 4.5 dB. But if you're looking for what's that oddball frequency that's pegging my ear from your female vocal, doesn't matter how beautiful she sounds just by herself in the room. When you put a microphone in front of her, put her through a PA, put her through a mix, put her through compression, 1,000 hertz, watch out for it. All right, so let's take a listen again with no EQ and then EQ, and listen for the low-end rumble as well that gets removed. No EQ.
The Lord is in this place.
Let me turn it on.
The Lord is in this place. Come, Holy Spirit.
Now, when she says spirit, you'll see that it moves up here in this top end a little bit. I don't have the de-esser to use because I'm using this this other compressor instead, so kind of some limitations that I wish I could work past. But with just using the console, I just decided to do a little bit of a dip here on the EQ. That's at about, what is this, 11.5K, just to help tame the S's a smidge. All right, let's listen to the compressor here. Let's take a look at it.
Dry bones awaken.
Turn it on.
The Lord is in this place. The Lord is in this place.
Off.
Not for a minute was I
On.
forsaken. The Lord is in this place. The Lord is in this place.
All right, so again, you can see it working here. This is a even lighter compression. This is a ratio of 2 to 1, but I do still have the fast attack, the no hold, and the fast release. I've got the makeup gain set at +4, and my knee, again, is at 2. So that's my first compressor. Now we can see the 1176 here, and we'll go back and turn that on for us. So let's take a listen without it.
The Lord is in this place.
On.
Come, Holy Spirit. Dry bones awaken.
Off.
The Lord is in this place.
Back on.
The Lord is in this place.
All right, so the 1176 again is really evening out the sound of the vocal in the mix. So if I turn on drums with no reverbs on or anything, I'm going to turn on just everything and let you hear where this sits with and without this Ultimo compressor. So let's turn it off. I'm going to have to do a little dance here. All right, here we go. Now turn it on. Hear the difference? Off. All right. So that's a big difference. You can hear how they pop up into the mix. And again, I'm already using the compressor. My gain is set properly. The compressor is taking out some frequencies, or some volume, but I'm raising it back up with the makeup gain. So using the secondary compressor really helps me dial the vocal into the mix and really helps me place it on top of the mix without it having these drastic spikes up and down when they breathe in and then they peg the first letter of the of a word or something. So now I want to set things up and we're going to talk about the effects.
The best thing you can do is hit the like button because that always makes your singers sing in tune.
All right, so we are now got a considerably different display here. These are the 3 effects that are being used on my vocals, and they're from top to bottom, least impactful to most impactful. So the first one is the vintage reverb. If you haven't checked out when I talked about that with the band, you can go back to that video at the end of this and you can watch the settings on that vintage reverb. I'm not going to dive into the specific settings of what I've got right now because I do go into those in depth. But this reverb first is giving a general room. It's more of a mid-rangey reverb, and we can hear it here. So if I have vocals running, and then I add this reverb.
The Lord is in this place.
Off.
The Lord is in this place. And come, Holy Spirit, dry bones.
So you can hear that kind of off to the left and right. Right when I mute it, you'll hear the reverb sound.
Is in this place, and not for a minute.
You hear that, kind of that reverb off to the sides.
The Lord is in this. The Lord is in this place.
All right, so that's what that reverb is doing. It's not a lot, but it's just enough to get them into the room and not be overpowering of the raw, more dry sound of the vocal. If you go too reverby, too much reverb in that mid-range, it's going to swallow the vocal, push them back in your mix, and they're going to sound like they're in a big washroom or like in a. It's going to sound more like a cathedral, which could be nice, but that's not what I want. I want the vocals to be up front, very present in the mix, but still have enough outside space that they don't sound super dry. All right, so that's effect number one. I'm going to remove that one now. And let's talk about the delay and chamber. The delay and chamber is my delay. The delay and chamber has a reverb quality to it. When I mix in a DAW, I always tend to run a delay, and then I put a reverb after it to soften that delay up and give it a little bit more breadth and quality. So that's what I found here, delay and chamber. So you can see that my time is set up with a tap tempo. I talk about this in the overview video, but I've got my assignable keys. For me, I'm using assignable key number 8 as my tap tempo. So if I tap it like this, you'll see the time is adjusted. This is 900. If I tap it really fast, you see the time goes down 500. So if we put it with the song, it seems to be about 800 milliseconds is the time. Now, the pattern right here is 1 to 2. Then I have my feed high cut, which is 1,000 hertz. Then my feedback is 30%. Cross feed is 50%. All right, now on the console, the next fader is the balance, which is top left up here. Balance determines you could go way to the right and go more reverb, less delay.
I found that nothing in life is worthwhile unless you take risks, having something to fall back on. If I'm going to fall, I don't want to fall back on anything except my faith. I want to fall forward. I figure at least this way I'll see what I'm going to hit. Fall forward. This is what I mean. Reggie Jackson struck out 2,600 times in his career, the most in the history of baseball. But you don't hear about the strikeouts. People remember the home runs. Fall forward. Thomas Edison conducted 1,000 failed experiments. Did you know that? I didn't know that. Because the 1,001st was the light bulb. Fall forward. Every failed experiment is one step closer to success. You've got to take risks, and I'm sure you've probably heard that before, but I want to talk to you about why that's so important. First, you will fail at some point in your life. Accept it. You will lose. You will embarrass yourself. You will suck at something. There's no doubt about it. And I know that's probably not a traditional message for a graduation ceremony, but hey, I'm telling you, embrace it, because it's inevitable. And I should know. In the acting business, you fail all the time. Early on in my career, I auditioned for a part in a Broadway musical. Perfect role for me, I thought, except for the fact that I can't sing. So I'm in the wings, I'm about to go on stage, but the guy in front of me, he's singing like Pavarotti. He's just going on and on and on, and I'm just shrinking. I'm getting smaller and smaller. So they say, "Oh, thank you very much, and you'll be hearing from us." So I come out with my little sheet music, and it was just my imagination by the Temptation. Looks out at the director and was like, So I start, I'm going to sing. I'm like, once again, coming away with me. And I'm not saying anything, so I'm thinking, I'm getting better. I start getting into it. Running. Thank you very much, Mr. Washington. Thank you. So I assumed I didn't get the job. But the next part of the audition, he called me back. The next part of the audition is the acting part of the audition. I'm like, hey, okay, maybe I can't sing, but I know I can act. So they pair me with this guy, and again, I didn't know about musical theater. And musical theater is big, so they can reach everyone all the way in the back of the stadium. And I'm more from a realistic, naturalistic kind of acting where you actually talk to the person next to you. So I don't know what my line was. My line was, well, hand me the cup. And his line was, well, I will hand you the cup, my dear. The cup will be there to be handed to you. I said, okay. Well, should I give you the cup back? Oh, yes, you should give it back to me, because you know that is my cup, and it should be given back to me. I didn't get the job. But here's the thing. I didn't quit. I didn't fall back. I walked out of there to prepare for the next audition, and the next audition, and the next audition. I prayed. I prayed. And I prayed. But I continued to fail, and fail. But it didn't matter, because you know what? There's an old saying, you hang around the barbershop long enough, sooner or later you're going to get a haircut. So you will catch a break, and I did catch a break. Last year, I did a play called Fences on Broadway. Someone talked about it. Won the Tony Award. And I didn't have to sing, by the way. But here's the kicker. It was at the Court Theater. It was at the same theater that I failed that first audition 30 years prior. The point is, every graduate here today has the training and the talent to succeed. But do you have the guts to fail? Here's my second point about failure. If you don't fail, you're not even trying. I'll say it again. If you don't fail, you're not even trying. My wife told me this great expression. To get something you never had, you have to do something you never did. Les Brown's a motivational speaker. He made an analogy about this. He says, imagine you're on your deathbed, and standing around your deathbed are the ghosts representing your unfulfilled potential. The ghost of the ideas you never acted on. The ghost of the talents you didn't use. And they're standing around your bed, angry, disappointed, and upset. They say, we came to you because you could have brought us to life, they say. And now we have to go to the grave together. So I ask you today, how many ghosts are going to be around your bed when your time comes? You've invested a lot in your education, and people have invested in you. And let me tell you, the world needs your talents. Man, does it ever. I just got back from Africa like 2 days ago, so if I'm rambling on, it's because I'm jet lagged. I just got back from South Africa. It's a beautiful country, but there are places there with terrible poverty that need help. And Africa is just the tip of the iceberg. The Middle East needs your help. Japan needs your help. Alabama needs your help. Tennessee needs your help. Louisiana needs your help. Philadelphia needs your help. The world needs a lot, and we need it from you. We really do. We need it from you young people. I mean, I'm not speaking for the rest of us up here, but I know I'm getting a little grayer. We need it from you, the young people. So you got to get out there. You got to give it everything you got, whether it's your time, your talent, your prayers, or your treasures. Because remember this, you will never see a U-Haul behind a hearse. You will never see a U-Haul behind a hearse. You can't take it with you. The Egyptians tried it, and all they got was robbed. So the question is, what are you going to do with what you have? I'm not talking about how much you have. Some of you are business majors, some of you are theologians, nurses, sociologists. Some of you have money, some of you have patience, some of you have kindness, some of you have love. Some of you have the gift of long suffering, whatever it is, whatever your gift is. What are you going to do with what you have? All right, now here's my last point about failure. Sometimes it's the best way to figure out where you're going. Your life will never be a straight path. I began at Fordham University as a pre-med student. I took a course called cardiac I still can't say it. Cardiac morphogenesis. I couldn't read it, I couldn't say it, I sure couldn't pass it. So then I decided to go into pre-law, then journalism. And with no academic focus, my grades took off in their own direction. Yeah, down. I was a 1.8 GPA one semester, and the university very politely suggested that it might be better to take some time off. I was 20 years old. I was at my lowest point. And then one day, and I remember the exact day, March 27th, 1975, I was helping my mother in her beauty shop. My mother owned a beauty shop up in Mount Vernon. And there was this older woman who was considered one of the elders in the town. And I didn't know her personally, but I was looking in the mirror, and every time I looked at the mirror, I could see her behind me, and she was staring at me. She just kept looking at me. Every time I looked at her, she kept giving me these strange looks. So she finally took the dryer off her head and she said something I'll never forget. First of all, she said, "Somebody give me a piece of paper. Give me a piece of paper." She said, "Young boy, I have a prophecy, a spiritual prophecy." She said, "You are going to travel the world and speak to millions of people." Now, mind you, I'm 20 years old. I'm flunked out of school. In fact, like a wise ass, I'm thinking to myself, maybe she's got something in that crystal ball about me getting back into school next fall. But maybe she was on to something, because later that summer, while working as a counselor at a YMCA camp in Connecticut, We put on a talent show for the campers. And after the show, another counselor came up to me and asked, have you ever thought about acting? You're good at that. So when I got back to Fordham that fall, I got in and I changed my major once again for the last time. And in the years that followed, just as that woman prophesied, I have traveled the world and I have spoken to millions of people through my movies. Millions who up till this day couldn't see me, who up till this day I couldn't see while I was talking to them, and they couldn't see me, they could only see the movie. They couldn't see the real me. But I see you today, and I'm encouraged by what I see. And I'm strengthened by what I see. And I love what I see. Without commitment, you'll never start. But more importantly, without consistency, you'll never finish. It's not easy. If it was easy, there'd be no Kerry Washington. If it was easy, there'd be no Taraji Henson, P. Henson. If it were easy, there'd be no Octavia Spencer. But not only that, if it were easy, there'd be no Viola Davis. If it were easy, there'd be no Michael T. Williamson, no Stephen McKinley Henderson, no Russell Hornsby. If it were easy, there'd be no Denzel Washington. So, keep working, keep striving, never give up, fall down 7 times, get up 8. Ease is a greater threat to progress than hardship. Ease is a greater threat to progress than hardship. So, keep moving, keep growing, keep learning. See you at work.
We tend to base our self-esteem on what other people think. And that's not really self-esteem. Self-esteem is supposed to be how we feel about ourselves. And I was just saying how dangerous it is to allow other people to determine how you're going to feel about you. And it's kind of like looking into a broken mirror. You're going to look in a broken mirror and then change your face to try to look good in this defiled, busted, broken mirror. And it just, other people's opinions is a really shitty way to determine how we feel about ourselves.
You'll never see a U-Haul behind a hearse. I'll say it again. You'll never see a U-Haul behind a hearse. Now, I've been blessed to make hundreds of millions of dollars in my life. I can't take it with me, and neither can you. So it's not how much you have, it's what you do with what you have. And we all have different gifts. Some money, some love, some patience, some the ability to touch people, but we all have it. Use it, share it. That's what counts. Not what you're driving, not what you're flying in, not what kind of house you bought your mama. Dreams without goals are just dreams, and they ultimately fuel disappointment. Goals on the road to achievement cannot be achieved without discipline and consistency. I pray that you all put your shoes way under the bed at night so that you gotta get on your knees in the morning.
The one thing I'm the most happy about in terms of my career is the fact that I got there with the grace of God, first of all, but short of that, I got there just by working hard, not partying with the right people, not compromising myself in any way or cutting any kind of deals, just by working hard, just by plugging along, sawing wood, as I like to call it. I'm a 20-year overnight sensation. I don't get life mixed up with making a living. I was there for all 4 of my children being born. When the first one was born, I recognized the difference between life and making a living. Their life, you know, our family is life. You know, acting is making a living.
Well, what do you think the biggest difference between doing a play and doing, I mean, it's a cliched question, but I'd be interested to know your answer.
I think a part of what Viola just said is that you get to dig deeper and you get another day.
Right.
And you get the energy. You do a movie and it's 200 people that are used to it and they don't care and everybody's doing their job and it comes in a theater somewhere and you're picking your nose at home somewhere, clipping your nails. There's no energy.
Right.
When I was on Broadway 5 years ago with Julius Caesar, I made a decision to sign autographs every night. I don't know what I did. Oh, yeah, it ain't happening this time, no. Only as I rub my knees, only because my knees are bad, it's hard for me to stand. But.
And why did you decide to do that?
Well, you know, I wanted to say thank you. It was my way of saying thank you. And the first night, it was like 5,000 people out there. I said, okay, wait a minute. Everybody who has playbills from our show. So, yeah, because it was like people were just wandering up the block. I was like, wait a minute. I forgot I'm on, 42nd Street, Times Square. I was like, wait a minute. But honestly,
you were signing for weeks.
The energy, and I was out there an hour and a half every night, every show. But the energy you got back, the stories, the 5 little old ladies who just drove in from Detroit. And I'm like, well, what y'all doing tonight? They said, we're getting back in the car, baby. We got to go back tonight. And, a little 84-year-old lady was like, baby, if I was 3 years younger. Oh, true story. True story. Then we had, and I say this also, because I hope it happens with this play. We had some high schools come. We had one school from somewhere, I forgot where, and they were doing Julius Caesar. And some young kid was like, well, my Brutus is a bit different. He's more the classic stoic. But it was great to engage and exchange with these young people. There was an energy. I got more from it than I gave to the people that I signed for. That's, you don't get that. The odd thing about success in film is the budgets get bigger, you make more money, but they become more formulaic. Yes. So you don't get the opportunity. So God willing, if I stay around long enough, this is what I'm going to be doing.
You're always affected by opinion, but the more opinions there are of you, of me, the less I look at them, because I just can't live my life based upon what other people think about me. So I can't concern myself too much with what other people think. It's just not healthy. I don't think I could continue to do what I do if I was constantly worrying about what somebody thought about it.
And anything you want good, you can have. So claim it. Work hard to get it. When you get it, reach back. Pull someone else up. Each one, teach one. Don't just aspire to make a living. Aspire to make a difference.
You don't have to compromise yourself. If there's something you don't feel good about, then don't do it. The most important choices I've made was to say no. And I've said no many a time to films that I just didn't, especially early on, I just didn't feel comfortable with. There was one script that was brought to me, I called it The They Couldn't Kill. Because they were like, he was accused of raping this white woman in the 40s, and they tried to hang him, but he didn't die. And they tried to electrocute him, and they were like, it's a comedy. I'm like, it ain't funny to me. So I actually called Sidney Poitier, who I was fortunate at that time to instill, to be able to call. And I said, this movie, I'm sick. And they offered me $600,000 to play The They Couldn't Kill. That's what I called it. I wasn't there. And he said to me, and I'll say this to you, he said, the first 2 or 3 or 4 films you make in this industry, Denzel, will determine how you proceed. He said, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but remember that the first 3 or 4 or 5 films you made will determine how you proceed. I turned it down. I turned the money down. I needed the money. I turned it down. 6 months later, I got Cry of Freedom. So stick to your guns. If you don't feel like you should do it, then don't do it. Because you don't want to be, you don't want to be a negative energy on the set. That's how I feel. So I'm like, I ain't doing this because I'm gonna slap somebody the second day. So I just, it's something. I think the most important decisions you can make as an actor, actress, is saying no. Is saying no. You don't have to take your clothes off. If you don't want to, then don't do it.
Number one, put God first. Put God first in everything you do. Everything that you think you see in me, everything that I've accomplished, everything that you think I have, and I have a few things, everything that I have is by the grace of God. Understand that. It's a gift. In everything you do, if you think you want to do what you think I've done, then do what I've done.
What starts here changes the world. I have a few suggestions that may help you on your way to a better world. And while these lessons were learned during my time in the military, I can assure you that it matters not whether you ever served a day in uniform. It matters not your gender, your ethnic or religious background, your orientation, or your social status. Our struggles in this world are similar, and the lessons to overcome those struggles and to move forward, changing ourselves and changing the world around us, will apply equally to all. So here are the 10 lessons I learned from basic SEAL training that hopefully will be of value to you as you move forward in life. Every morning in SEAL training, my instructors, who at the time were all Vietnam veterans, would show up in my barracks room, and the first thing they'd do was inspect my bed. If you did it right, the corners would be square, the covers would be pulled tight, the pillow centered just under the headboard, and the extra blanket folded neatly at the foot of the rack. It was a simple task, mundane at best, but every morning we were required to make our bed to perfection. It seemed a little ridiculous at the time, particularly in light of the fact that we were aspiring to be real warriors, tough, battle-hardened SEALs. But the wisdom of this simple act has been proven to me many times over. If you make your bed every morning, you will have accomplished the first task of the day. It will give you a small sense of pride, and it will encourage you to do another task, and another, and another. And by the end of the day, that one task completed will have turned into many tasks completed. Making your bed will also reinforce the fact that the little things in life matter. If you can't do the little things right, you'll never be able to do the big things right. And if by chance you have a miserable day, you will come home to a bed that is made, that you made. And a made bed gives you encouragement that tomorrow will be better. So if you want to change the world, start off by making your bed. During SEAL training, the students are all broken down into boat crews. Each crew is 7 students, 3 on each side of a small rubber boat, and 1 coxswain to help guide the dinghy. Every day, your boat crew forms up on the beach and is instructed to get through the surf zone and paddle several miles down the coast. In the winter, the surf off San Diego can get to be 8 to 10 feet high, and it is exceedingly difficult to paddle through the plunging surf unless everyone digs in. Every paddle must be synchronized to the stroke count of the coxswain. Everyone must exert equal effort, or the boat will turn against the wave and be unceremoniously dumped back on the beach. For the boat to make it to its destination, everyone must paddle. You can't change the world alone. You will need some help. And to truly get from your starting point to your destination takes friends, colleagues, the goodwill of strangers, and a strong coxswain to guide you. If you want to change the world, find someone to help you paddle. Over a few weeks of difficult training, my SEAL class, which started with 150 men, was down to just 42. There were now 6 boat crews of 7 men each. I was in the boat with the tall guys, but the best boat crew we had was made up of the little guys, the Munchkin crew, we called them. No one was over 5'5". The Munchkin boat crew had 1 American Indian, 1 African American, 1 Polish American, 1 Greek American, 1 Italian American, and 2 tough kids from the Midwest. They out-paddled, outran, and outswam all the other boat crews. The big men in the other boat crews would always make good-natured fun of the tiny little flippers the Munchkins put on their tiny little feet prior to every swim. But somehow these little guys from every corner of the nation and the world always had the last laugh, swimming faster than everyone and reaching the shore long before the rest of us.